One of the questions that I believe I got asked recently was, what is the difference between scripting a task and going through the GUI and doing the exact same thing? And one point that I want to make about today is about scripting versus the GUI. So for instance, and I'm going to use this as an initial example. This is if you right click on the database, like whatever your database is, and you guys can't see that part of my window pane, but if you were to right click on your database, let's suppose it's AdventureWorks, right click on it, you'll see in the menu there's an option called tasks, and it has an over right arrow, and the next menu that pops up you'll see backup, right? So you can back up a database. And this is the backup window that pops up, or some of the backup window I should say. And you have some options that you can select. That's the general information, and then the options. And you'll see that, okay, you can back up a database, right? You can, place it here. You can do all of this right here. Why would you ever need to script anything, right? I mean, doesn't it just seem simpler? And depending on, how much you use Windows or how much you use, like, what is it? I can't think of the Macintosh, whatever, the Apple program. Depending on what you use, it may seem like it's a lot better to just do it through the GUI, right? When you use Excel, it's not like you're punching in a bunch of code. You're doing it through the GUI, whatever's provided through the actual program. So SQL Server allows you to do that, and that might be a lot simpler. However, there are many advantages to scripting, and so I'll discuss some of those really quickly just to highlight them. The first one is the fact that a script provides a receipt of the changes that you've applied. So for instance, if you update 10,000 rows of data, a script shows the 10,000 rows of data that you updated, or it doesn't show the rows you updated, but it shows what you applied. You updated this many rows of data. Here's a receipt. That makes the database administrator's job a lot easier than, here I'm going to change a bunch of stuff, but I'm not going to let you know what change I applied. And that actually comes up quite a bit. Some people will make a huge change and they're like, oh, I forgot what I did. It was like 700 rows updated when it was really 10,000. Well, can you imagine the headache when they're trying to go through and figure out what update in the transaction logs was incorrect? Okay. The other one, like in a backup, if you do something wrong on the backup, and by the way, you can hit script here, so you can script whatever you do through the GUI before you execute it. If you backed up the database in an incorrect location or in an incorrect way, you can look at the script, the receipt, and say, here was the error. Without a script, we're not sure. We have to start guessing. Also, if you've looked at the video that I had, which is a really important video, probably more important than anything else, which is minimize errors on inserts, updates, and deletes. On a script, you can build an error check. Through the GUI, you may not be able to do that. In fact, for instance, on backing up a database, you can punch it into a wrong location, whereas on a script, we might have a default backup script that doesn't allow you to save it to the D drive. You have to save it to the E drive, and it'll throw an error if you try to save it to another drive other than E. So scripting can prevent errors, or it can help us identify errors, whereas the GUI may not allow us to do that. So just because we go through the program and we have the ability to go through the program doesn't mean we can minimize an error. As a case in point, if you were to right-click on a table and there's an option that pops up, one of the options is edit top 200 rows. Or we can edit data, right? We can add data. We can, edit this sentiment date here, right? I don't have to do an update script to update this date. I can also go to the very top bar and hit SQL, and I can see what SQL statement this is, and again I can edit values down here. And again, I know people who go through the GUI and that's how they update data. Well, again, with scripting, we can prevent errors. You can enter anything you want in that get date field, but you may enter something which is invalid. You may enter the wrong date, as long as you're doing it manually too, and then it becomes much more difficult to track. So that's one of the advantages that's one of the advantages of scripting is basically it eliminates possible errors, and then again it makes the database administrator's job a lot easier when it comes to, I made a mistake, we need to roll back the changes. And then the probably largest example of the benefits to using scripts is multiple environments. Pretty much every company I've worked at, I cannot think of an exception off the top of my head except for one energy company, and all of his data at the energy company was development anyway. He didn't have a production environment because only he looked at the data. It's very similar to what I do with stocks. Only I look at the data. So it's always technically a development environment. But one of the things that he did, or one of the things we did, is he just had a development environment. But every other company that I've worked at has either a dev and a production, or a dev, a QA, a before production, and then a production. So in other words, there's 4 multiple environments, and then within those environments there may be multiple environments. So for instance, we have 3 dev environments where I currently am at. We have 3 QA environments, and then we have, I believe it's 3 before production environments, then a production environments. That's 10 total environments. So let's suppose that I go through the GUI, right, and I insert data. So again, I can go to the database, I can do tasks, and I never import data this way, so you can tell. And I go through the wizard and I click, and I select the file and select the data source, and I do all this. Okay, well then I go to my next dev environment, right? Then I have to do it again, especially if the file's on a file share where it can be accessed anywhere. And then I have to do it again, and then I have to do it again. Think about it for each environment. So let's suppose it takes me 5 minutes for each environment, right? And it is funny to me that almost most of the college graduates that I work with who have degrees in computer science, they go through the GUI, whereas I tend to go through the scripting. And the reason is because, okay, so 10 environments times 5 minutes is how long? 50 minutes, right? 6 minutes to write the initial script, but now the initial script can be just executed on each environment. It takes a total of 6 minutes plus, let's say, 10 seconds to run the script. You've saved a huge amount of time, especially when this position, usually pays anywhere from, let's say, $30 to $60 an hour. You've saved a huge amount of time and money. There's no reason to go through the GUI in each environment. That's going to take forever. Scripting gives you power. And by the way, to build on that, think about something like PowerShell when you have multiple servers. It's not just multiple environments. You have multiple servers. The database, for instance, may be on 300 servers. Then you have something like PowerShell that you can apply to all 300 in a matter of seconds. So scripting, first of all, prevents errors. Scripting reduces errors. Scripting makes the database administrator's job easier. When you can sit there and say, this is the script that I wrote, it ended up throwing a huge error, or it didn't throw a huge error, it updated the data, and it turns out I didn't want to update these data. Now he has a receipt, right? Or she has a receipt. And they can go through and look and see, this is the mistake that you made. And then the other big advantage as well is that you can apply it to multiple environments. So yes, you may be able to go through the GUI, you may be able to go through the program, but just because you can do something through the program or through the GUI doesn't mean that's going to be faster, doesn't mean that's going to save your company a lot of time. So keep in mind, scripting gives you a great deal of power, saves time, and of course, the biggest advantage of all is it reduces errors.